How can this be? This is not true. I can't be pregnant. I am a virgin. Lilian Matthews was a 22-year-old university student pursuing a degree in psychology. She is a pastor's daughter and known for her unwavering faith and her kind heart. Between her studies and volunteering at the church, she lived a structured and virtuous life. Her days were filled with classes, assignments, and occasional videos she posted online to inspire others to embrace their faith. One warm afternoon, as she prepared to head to campus, her mother, Martha, called out to her, "Lilian, don't forget about your doctor's appointment today." "Mom, it's just a routine checkup. I'm fine," Lilian replied, rolling her eyes. Martha wasn't having it. "You have been looking pale lately. Promise me you will go. Your health is important." Reluctantly, Lilian agreed. All right. I will go after my lecture." Later that day at the hospital, as Lilian walked in, smiling, not knowing that what is about to happen will change the course of her life forever. A clerical error set the wheels of fate in motion. Lilian's file was accidentally swapped with that of another woman, a surrogate chosen for billionaire Alexander Blackwood. The doctor, under immense pressure to meet tight schedules, performed the insemination procedure on Lilian without verifying her identity. Unaware of what had happened, Lilian left the hospital, assuming her checkup had been uneventful. Weeks passed, and Lilian began feeling unwell. Nausea, fatigue, and strange cravings disrupted her routine. At first, she attributed it to the stress from exams, but when her symptoms worsened, Martha insisted she returned to the hospital. "I told you something was off," her mother scolded gently. She handed Lilian her coat and urged her to go back to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctor delivered shocking news. "Miss Matthews, you're pregnant." Lilian froze. "Pregnant?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. "That's impossible." The doctor looked uneasy. "Understand this is unexpected, but the results are conclusive. Is there any chance?" "No," Lilian interrupted, her voice trembling. "I've never been with anyone. There has to be a mistake." The doctor promised to investigate, but Lilian left in a daze. Back at home, she locked herself in her room, her mind racing. How could this happen? What would her family say? Next evening, after much internal debate, Lilian gathered her parents in her living room. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something," she began, her hands shaking. Martha immediately sensed the gravity of her daughter's tone. "What is it, sweetheart?" Lilian took a deep breath. "I am pregnant." Her father, Pastor Matthew, stared at her in disbelief. "What are you saying, Lilian?" His voice was calm, but carried an edge of confusion. "It wasn't my fault," Lilian said quickly, tears streaming down her face. "The hospital, they made a mistake. I don't know how, but I didn't do anything wrong. You have to believe me." Matthew rose from his seat, pacing the room. "A mistake? Do you realize what this means for our family? For you?" "Matthew," Martha interrupted, her voice steady but firm. "This is our daughter. We know her character. Let's hear her out." After hours of tearful explanations, her parents agreed to support her, but the news still weighed heavily on their hearts. Lilian couldn't shake the feeling that her father's faith in her had been shaken. The news spread like wildfire through their small, tight-knit church community. By the next Sunday, whispers followed Lilian wherever she went. "Did you hear about Pastor Matthew's daughter? Pregnant, and she's not even married. What a disgrace." Lilian kept her head high, but inside she was falling apart. After the service, she sat alone in the church garden, her Bible clutched tightly in her hands. Her best friend Sylvia found her there. "Hey," Sylvia said softly, sitting beside her. "I feel like everyone is judging me," Lilian admitted, her voice cracking. "Let them talk," Sylvia replied firmly. "They don't know you like I do. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone." Lilian managed a small smile. "Thank you, Sylvia. I don't know how I'll get through this without you." Meanwhile, in a city far away, Alexander Blackwood sat in his luxurious penthouse, surrounded by silence. At 32, he was one of the wealthiest men in the country, but his wealth couldn't fill the void left by the loss of his wife and twin sons. The tragedy had broken him. His uncle, Victor Blackwood, had orchestrated the car accident that claimed their lives in a bid to seize the family fortune. Though Victor had been cut out of the family, his betrayal left deep scars. "You need an heir, Alexander," his mother Eleanor insisted during a rare visit. "The Blackwood name can't end with you." Reluctantly, Alexander agreed to surrogacy. "Handle everything," he told his assistant Stanley. "I don't want to know her name or anything about her." A few weeks later, Stanley received a letter from the hospital informing him that the surrogate was successfully pregnant. However, days later, another call came, this time reporting a miscarriage. Deciding not to bother Alexander further, Stanley chose to keep the news to himself. But when the hospital conducted an internal investigation, they discovered the error and contacted Stanley. "There has been a mix-up," the hospital representative admitted. "The pregnancy wasn't lost. We noticed that there had been a mistake in the surrogacy. A wrong surrogate was inseminated with your boss's sperm. And in order to cover it up, one of our staffs decided to call back and tell you that there had been a miscarriage. We have done an internal investigation. We have seen the doctor that was at fault, being that he was overworked and made some mistakes that day. We have terminated the employment of those that are involved and would like to deeply apologize for this error. However, currently, we have noticed that a young lady who was not booked for surrogacy at all happens to be the one who is now pregnant with your boss's child." Stanley's face paled. "What do you mean? Who is this patient?" "Her name is Lilian Matthews," the representative explained. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Stanley decided to visit Lilian personally. When Stanley arrived at Lilian's modest home, she answered the door hesitantly. "Can I help you? My name is Stanley. I work for Alexander Blackwood. May I come in?" Lilian's parents joined her in the living room, their expressions wary. Stanley explained everything: the hospital error, the surrogacy, and Alexander's unawareness of the situation. "So you are telling us my daughter is carrying some billionaire's child because of your negligence?" Pastor Matthew said, his voice rising. "I deeply apologize," Stanley said sincerely, "but Mr. Blackwood has a right to know." Lilian was furious. "You have turned my life upside down, and now you want me to involve some stranger?" "No." Stanley's tone grew urgent. "Miss Matthews, this child is a Blackwood. That comes with risk. You need his protection." After much debate, Lilian reluctantly agreed to meet Alexander. "But if anything happens to her," Pastor Matthew warned, "it's on you." The next week, Lilian, accompanied by Stanley, arrived at Alexander Blackwood's mansion. The estate was grand, almost overwhelming, with towering gates and manicured gardens. Lilian felt small and out of place, clutching her bag tightly as she approached the door. Stanley led her into Alexander's study, where the man himself stood by a window staring out at the vast estate. His presence was commanding, his tailored suit fitting perfectly on his tall, broad frame. Alexander turned, his piercing blue eyes landing on Lilian. "Who is this?" he asked, his tone cold and detached. "This is Lilian Matthews," Stanley began, but Alexander cut him off. "Why is she here?" Lilian summoned her courage and stepped forward. "I'm here because of a mistake." "Your mistake," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Alexander raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "I don't deal with personal matters. Stanley, handle this." "Wait," Lilian snapped, surprising even herself. "I'm carrying your child because of a hospital error. You may not care about me, but this baby deserves better than your indifference." Alexander's expression shifted. A flicker of something unreadable passed over his face. You're saying you're pregnant with my child? Yes, Lillian said firmly. And I won't let this child be dragged into your world of wealth and danger without a say in what happens next. Alexander sat down, his jaw tightening. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly, but I won't ignore my responsibility. Stanley, arrange for her protection. She will stay here. What? Lillian protested. I can't just live here. I have a family, a life, university. It's not a request. Alexander interrupted. You and the baby will be safer here. Your life has already changed, Miss Matthews. Accept it. Lillian's hands balled into fists, but she knew arguing further wouldn't help. Fine, she said, her voice sharp, but don't think for a second that I will be some pawn in your world. Moving into the Blackwood mansion was overwhelming for Lillian. The sprawling hallways, the endless rooms, and the staff who attended to her every need made her feel out of place. She called her parents every evening, their voices grounding her in a world that felt increasingly foreign. Are you sure you are okay, sweetheart? Martha asked one night. I'm managing, Lillian replied. But I miss home. Her interactions with Alexander were minimal at first. He kept his distance, burying himself in work or retreating to his private wing of the mansion. Lillian, meanwhile, found an unlikely friend in Stanley. You look lost, Stanley said one afternoon as he found her wandering the gardens. Lillian sighed. I don't belong here, Stanley. I'm just a university student, not whatever this world expects me to be. Stanley smiled kindly. You belong here because of that baby, and trust me, you are stronger than you think. One evening, Lillian was reading in the library when Alexander walked in. He paused, surprised to see her there. You read? He asked, his tone almost curious. Lillian raised an eyebrow. Why wouldn't I? Alexander shrugged. Most people I know prefer parties or business meetings to books. Well, I am not most people, Lillian replied, her voice cool. Alexander smirked friendly, an expression Lillian hadn't seen before. Clearly, he said. Over the following weeks, their interactions grew less strained. Alexander began asking questions about her life, her studies, and her family. Lillian, hesitant at first, found herself opening up. I never wanted this life, Alexander admitted one night over dinner. The wealth, the legacy, it comes with more pain than it's worth. Lillian looked at him, surprised by his vulnerability. Then why stay? He asked. For people who depend on me, Alexander replied. And now, for the baby. Unknown to Lillian, danger loomed closer. Victor Blackwood, Alexander's uncle, had been watching the situation unfold from afar. Furious that an heir could jeopardize his ambitions, he began plotting to eliminate the threat. Victor sent a message to Alexander through an intermediary. You are playing a dangerous game, nephew. One misstep and everything you care about will crumble. Alexander read the message with a clenched jaw. He summoned Stanley immediately. Double the security around the mansion. No one comes in or out without my approval. Do you think Victor would actually try something? Stanley asked. Alexander's eye darkened. I don't think. I know. One night, as Lillian sat in the nursery, arranging baby clothes, she heard a noise outside the window. Her heart raced as she peered out, spotting a shadow moving across the garden. She grabbed her phone and called Stanley. Someone's outside, she whispered, her voice shaking. Stay where you are, lock the door, I'm on my way, Stanley replied. Minutes later, Stanley and two security guards burst into the nursery. The shadow was gone, but the footprints in the garden confirmed Lillian's fears. Alexander stormed in moments later, his expression livid. What happened? Stanley explained, and Alexander's fists clenched. It's Victor, he said grimly. He's testing us. Lillian's voice trembled as she spoke. I can't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder. You won't have to, Alexander vowed. I'll make sure of it. Lillian's fear lingered after the close call, but she channeled it into resilience. She started spending more time in the nursery, reading parenting books and preparing for the baby's arrival. One afternoon, Alexander found her there, humming softly as she folded tiny clothes. For a moment, he hesitated at the door, watching her. "You are surprisingly calm," he said, stepping inside. Lillian glanced up, startled. "What choice do I have? I can't let fear control me. Not when I have a baby to think about." Alexander admired her strength, but didn't say so. Instead, he asked, "What kind of life do you want for the baby?" Lillian thought for a moment. I want the baby to grow up knowing he or she is loved, not just by me, but by his or her father too. I want my child to have stability, not this chaos." Alexander nodded, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I'll make sure of that," he promised, his voice firm. Their conversation marked a shift. Alexander started spending more time with Lillian, asking about her classes, her interests, and her dreams. Slowly, the ice wall between them began to thaw. Victor, frustrated by his failed attempts, decided to take bolder action. He hired a private investigator to dig into Lillian's background, hoping to find something he could use against her. The investigator returned with little. Lillian's life was an open book, but Victor latched onto one detail: her financial struggles as a university student. Using this, Victor spread a rumor to the media, suggesting Lillian had schemed to trap Alexander for his wealth. Within days, the tabloids ran sensationalized stories: gold-digging students pregnant with billionaires' heir. Lillian woke to her phone buzzing relentlessly. Friends, classmates, and even distant relatives had seen the headlines. Tears blurred her vision as she read the cruel accusations. Alexander found her in the garden, clutching her phone. "Have you seen this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I have," Alexander said calmly. "It's Victor's doing." "So that's it? He ruins my reputation and we do nothing?" Lillian snapped, anger replacing her tears. Alexander's jaw tightened. "We will do something, Lillian, but we have to be smart about it." Unable to tolerate Victor's games any longer, Alexander confronted his uncle at a private club. The air between them was thick with tension as Alexander entered the room, his expression cold and unyielding. Victor greeted him with a small smile. "Ah, Alexander, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "You know why I'm here," Alexander said, his voice low and threatening. "The media circus, the intrusions, it ends now." Victor chuckled. "You're so predictable, always trying to play the hero. But let me remind you, nephew, this empire does not belong to a bastard child." Alexander's fist clenched. "You think wealth gives you power, but it doesn't. I've spent years cleaning up your messes, Victor. Don't mistake my restraint for weakness." Victor leaned back, his eyes gleaming with malice. "If you won't step aside, I will do whatever it takes to ensure that child never inherits the Blackwood name." Alexander's voice was like steel. "Try me, and I will bury you." The media storm grew worse. Lillian couldn't leave the mansion without being hounded by paparazzi, and online trolls attacked her relentlessly. One night, she sat in the nursery, her hands trembling as she scrolled through hateful comments. "Maybe I should leave," she whispered to Stanley, who had become her confidant. Stanley frowned. "Leave? And let Victor win?" "Lillian, you are stronger than this. It's not just me anymore," she said, placing a hand on her green belly. "I have to think about the baby." Stanley nodded, his expression softening. "And so does Alexander. Trust him, he'll protect you." Meanwhile, Alexander was working behind the scenes to clear Lillian's name. He held a press conference, a rare move for the reclusive billionaire. "I want to address the rumors surrounding Lillian Matthews," Alexander said, his voice steady. "She's an innocent woman caught in an unfortunate situation. Any attacks on her character are unfounded and unacceptable. To the media and anyone else targeting her, consider this your final warning." His statement silenced many critics, but Victor's shadow still loomed. Victor's desperation reached a boiling point. Late one night, he sent men to infiltrate the mansion. Their target clear: Lilian and the unborn child. Lilian was reading in her room when she heard the faint sound of the footsteps outside her door. Her heart raced, and she quietly locked it and dialed Alexander. "Someone is in the house," she whispered. "Stay where you are," Alexander ordered, already moving toward her wing with security in tow. The intruders attempted to break down the door, but Alexander and his guards arrived just in time. A struggle ensued, with Alexander personally taking down one of the men. As the dust settled, Alexander pulled Lilian into his arms, his voice trembling with emotion. "I won't let anything happen to you or the baby, I swear it." For the first time, Lilian saw the depth of his resolve. Despite his flaws and his cold exterior, Alexander was fiercely protective of the people he cared about. Determined to end Victor's reign of terror, Alexander sought help from an unlikely source: Victor's former ally, Edward King. Edward, a disgraced businessman, held a grudge against Victor. When Alexander approached him with an offer of redemption, Edward agreed to help expose Victor's crimes. "This isn't about revenge," Alexander told Edward. "It's about justice for my family and the future of my child." With Edward's information, Alexander built a case against Victor, uncovering years of embezzlement, fraud, and even his involvement in the accident, Alexander's wife and children. Armed with evidence, Alexander confronted Victor one final time. This time, the meeting wasn't private. It was at a board meeting with key stakeholders present. As Alexander laid out Victor's crimes, gasps filled the room. Victor's smug demeanor crumbled as he realized the magnitude of his exposure. "You think you have won, Alexander?" Victor spat, his voice trembling with rage. "This isn't over." "It is," Alexander said coldly. "You are finished." Within days, Victor was arrested, his empire dismantled. For the first time in years, Alexander felt a weight lift from his shoulders. With Victor gone, peace returned to the mansion. Lilian gave birth to a healthy baby boy, naming him Caleb. Alexander, once a man consumed by grief and anger, became a devoted father. He spent hours with Caleb, marveling at the life they had created. One evening, as Lilian watched Alexander holding Caleb by the fire, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't known in months. "You have changed," she said softly. Alexander looked at her, his expression warm. "You changed me," he replied. Their journey had been filled with pain, danger, and uncertainty, but in the end, they had found something precious: a family forged in the fire of adversity, stronger for having endured it together. Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. Do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any of our uploads. Bye!